I'm Lucy.
And I'm Jennifer.
You're listening to Everything I Know About.
Each week, we share everything we know about a new topic, equipped with some internet research and a little too much exposure to pop culture. Hey, everyone.
Hi.
We are recording on October 2nd, and it is the start of my favorite month of the year. I personally am a Scorpio rising, and Lucy is a Scorpio sun. So we are not only in Scorpio season almost, but it's also the month of Halloween, which is, of course, the best holiday. I am a spooky girl, love spooky stuff, and it's spooky season. So I'm very excited this episode to talk about the history of Halloween, the traditions, how it became such a huge phenomenon in the United States.
And then I'll be covering how a couple other cultures celebrate their dead and think about the afterlife. I picked 3 really disparate regions, Mexico, Japan, and Ghana. I'm excited to share what I've found.
So, Lucy, what is your feeling on Halloween?
I have great memories of Halloween as a kid. I remember we had this neighbor who would decorate their whole house. They would turn their garage into this spooky cavern. It wasn't a haunted house because we were too young. Like, we would have been terrified by an actual haunted house, but they had spooky-ish, kid-friendly activities. Have you done the thing where they turn all the lights off and you have all of these bowls and you don't know what's in them, and then you stick your hand into it and it's dark and they tell you like you're touching brains or you're touching eyeballs or intestines? And it really feels like that because you're touching cold noodles or like meatballs and it's gooey.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
So they would do things like that. They had like dunk your head in a bucket of water and grab an apple. So definitely remember that from my childhood being super fun. And then as I was becoming a preteen, I remember like my middle school boyfriend, I told my parents, I was like, I'm going to go trick-or-treating. But really, he like met up with me. And that was like our date as we went trick-or-treating, like the naughty and nice spice of that. So I remember that being really exciting. But yeah, as an adult, I don't have that many crazy memories on Halloween.
You know, every single thing that you just described doing as a kid and as like a preteen, we're going to talk about the origins of it. I'm just sitting here listening to you and like, and I know where that came from, and I know where that came from, and we're going to talk about that. So.
Amazing. We're unpacking my childhood at the same time that we're discussing history. What about you? Why do you still love it so much as an adult?
I love the macabre, the esoteric, and the spiritual. I'm so fascinated by all of it, as I've said, like every single podcast episode. So we all know that about me. And so just this entire season, it's in the forefront. You walk outside, like right now, my neighbors across the street, they have all of this spooky mood lighting on their house, and there's little ghost statues dancing around a tree. I just love it so much. It's great. So I like Halloween more for the excuse to do some like weird seance stuff and like be a little witchy. I'm not big into the dressing up part of it as much. As an adult, it just feels like, oh, you dress up and you get drunk at somebody's house. And like, that's not what I'm interested in. I want to like get my fortune told and be scared shitless somewhere. Like, I'm definitely going to go to a haunted house.
Yeah.
I'm definitely probably going to do some spell work.
I feel like the Nashville haunted houses probably are pretty good.
They are. We have one of the highest rated haunted houses in the country.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. I thought I was just stereotyping Southerners, but yeah, you guys know how to scare.
Yeah, for sure.
My friend invited me to like this haunted house in a prison.
Oh.
Which I was like, that sounds really, actually really scary.
Yeah, I'm sure that place is actually haunted.
Yes, exactly. So I have yet to say yes to that, but we'll see. I'll let you guys know if I do end up going.
Well, you don't like scary, tense things. Like, you can't even watch dramas.
I don't. Exactly. I don't. I want to like them so badly, but I don't. So I'm scared. Yeah.
Oh my God. All right. Well, if you had to guess, do you know anything about the origins of Halloween?
I would guess that it originated somewhere in ancient Europe, maybe with the plague, like some sort of fear of death thing, perhaps.
Oh, that's an interesting guess.
Am I close?
It is European, not continental. We're going to go back to ancient Ireland. Going to visit the Celts because they actually started all of Halloween. So I'm going to say in advance, I know we have some Irish listeners. I apologize for all of the pronunciation errors I'm going to make. I did look up how to pronounce some of these festivals and like the difference between Celtic and Gaelic. So it's my understanding that Celtic, not Celtic, is the right pronunciation. And we're going to say Celtic and not Gaelic because Gaelic is the language, not the culture. So with that prefaced, the tradition originated with the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain, but it's spelled Samhain. The pronunciation is actually Samhain, apparently. During this ancient tradition, people would light bonfires and wear costumes to ward off ghosts. Already sounding very familiar. This happened on October 31st because November 1st marked the end of summer and the end of harvest and started the winter season, which was notoriously dark, dreary, and scary and was associated with human death. The Celts believed that the night before this new year, the worlds between the living and the dead were blurred, ghosts would return back to Earth, and they would cause a little bit of chaos, but there were also good ghosts. So this is the classic thinning of the veil between the worlds.
Mhm.
The ghosts and other supernatural beings could be friendly, playful, or troubling, and they believed that they would ruin crops and create mischief in the community. They also had a very important function of making it easier for the Celtic priests, which they called druids, to make predictions and prophecies about the upcoming year. So, since the winters were so tough, they would cling to these prophecies and it would lift their spirits through the winter. So, to celebrate, the druids built these large bonfires and the community gathered to burn animals and crops as sacrifices to these deities. And the Celts wore costumes of animal heads and skins and told each other's fortunes. And then they relit their hearth fires from the sacred bonfire to keep them safe during the upcoming winter months. So, this is the origin of Halloween. And then, of course, the Roman Empire comes and conquers Ireland in 43 AD.
Mhm.
And over the next 400 years, Samhain is combined with two Roman holidays, Feralia and Pomona. Feralia is a late October holiday, also commemorating the passage of the dead. Pomona is an honorific day of the Roman goddess Pomona of fruit and trees, and her symbol is the apple, which explains the tradition of bobbing for apples on Halloween.
Oh,
So we have the Roman traditions, the Celtic traditions, and then we're just going to throw Christianity into the mix because in 8th century, Pope Gregory III designated November 1st as a time to honor All Saints. Christianity was sweeping England and Ireland at this time, and November 2nd was All Souls Day, while November 1st was All Saints Day. And the Catholic Church really tried to replace Samhain, trying to get them to stop celebrating the pagan tradition by replacing it with a church anointed holiday on the 2nd of November instead of October 31st. Everyone kind of said screw that and kept celebrating on October 31st anyway. But what is funny about this is we get the name Halloween from this attempted transition. All Souls Day in Middle English is, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. It's like Aloe Messe or something. But, but in more modern English, it's All Hallows or All Hallowsmen. So then the day before that celebration was All Hallows Eve, Halloween.
makes sense.
Yes.
I'm kind of shocked that that transition with Christianity coming was so smooth. I feel like usually when Christianity comes, a whole lot of repression, bloodshed, and the destruction of culture and tradition happens. So it's interesting to me that they were like, we'll kind of let you keep celebrating it, we'll transform it, we'll embrace it, and try to turn it into this new mishmash of both religions.
I know. And it's funny because that actually happened with most of the modern Christian holidays. Like they have pagan roots, they're celebrated at the same times. It made the transition to Christianity easier because it was before Christianity had like armies and crusades and the Pope was really powerful. We're talking like early
Mm,
centuries of Christianity. So they're like, if we're going to make them do it, it's going to have to be a little bit similar.
yeah.
So even though Christianity did replace the pagan religions in England, all of these pagan traditions still remained, and we see them today. The American colonists from England brought the tradition of Samhain to the United States. Interestingly enough, though, it was only celebrated in like the middle and southern colonies and not so much in New England because in New England, they were so rigidly Protestant and
Mhm.
rejected any sort of Catholicism or paganism.
Okay, so like the whole hunt for witches that happened in New England had actually nothing to do with Halloween.
No. They're not traditionally associated with the holiday. I think that has more to do with just like costumes and spooky things in general
Got it.
being associated with the holiday more in modern times. I thought that too because they specifically called out Massachusetts not celebrating Halloween. And I'm like, Salem is the place to go during
Right.
Halloween. So
Hmm.
very interesting. So the American colonies were culturally influenced a ton, especially in the 1600s by Native American cultures. And Native Americans celebrated the new harvest in October, November timeframe again with parties and dancing and singing. And so the colonists celebrated Halloween with them and started making parties of their own. So they would invite everyone over, dress up in costumes, dance and sing. And these were the very first Halloween parties in America.
Oh, well, it's before all the bloodshed and whatnot.
Yeah,
I don't think this will last.
I did not. But it went on like this for a few hundred years, though. So in the 1850s, the annual autumn festivities that were commonly known as Halloween at this point were quite popular, again, only in the southern and middle colonies. But that changed in the late 1800s when the Irish potato famine happened. And we had an influx of Irish immigrants, and they brought Halloween with them. So it blew up all around the country. And Americans started borrowing from these more European traditions of Halloween, dressing up in different kinds of costumes and going around to houses asking for food or money. And this is the early origins of trick-or-treating.
And what were people dressing up as at this time? Like, clearly they weren't dressed up as witches or like the modern costumes we all think of. So,
Yeah. The pagan tradition was to dress up as animal skins, dressing up as the animals that they're sacrificing to the hearth fire. And so there was a little bit of that going on. But then the Catholic tradition was to dress up as either the saints, devils, or angels. So your classic like devil angel Halloween costume is actually the OG Halloween costume, which is very funny.
wow. Yeah, I feel like that's considered so unoriginal nowadays. But now if you do dress up as that, which is an easy last minute costume for your Halloween party, you can bring all these historical facts to back yourself up.
Yep. It's funny because last episode when we were talking about spirit Halloween costumes, I said something about like dressing up as a sexy nun and how that's overdone.
Yeah.
But I'm like, damn, no, that's like the OG. Like you dress up as saints, you dress up as these
Yeah.
Catholic figures. So, in addition to trick or treating, young women believed that on Halloween they could divine the name or appearance of their future husband. So, this is my kind of Halloween. I like this
Mhm.
kind of tradition. So, they started doing tricks with yarn, apple parings, and mirrors. In the late 1800s, there was a move by the American government to make Halloween a holiday more about community and neighborly gathering and less about ghosts, pranks, and witchcraft. Parents were encouraged by newspapers and community leaders to take anything frightening, grotesque, or Halloween adjacent that we would think of today out of the celebrations. And because of this effort, Halloween became mostly about the children. And that's
Mm.
why today it's less of an adult thing. Even though Halloween was less scary and more for the kids at this point, there was a problem, especially in the 1900s, with vandalism and crime during
Mm.
Halloween. And it got so bad that they almost outlawed Halloween entirely.
Wow. In the US?
Yes. Here's a few examples. So in Newport, Kentucky in 1879, a passenger train engineer saw a body lying on the tracks and he emergency broke and then ran out, was able to stop just in time. And he's freaking out and realizes it's just a stuffed figure.
Yeah.
200 boys come out of the trees and just start laughing at him.
Oh my God.
It was like a community-wide prank with the little boys.
Little? Like young kids?
It's the boys. I assume they're not
Oh my
men.
gosh. I'm picturing like 200 scowling, laughing teenagers. Like, that's quite scary.
Yeah. Some other common tricks were placing farm wagons and livestock on top of barn roofs.
Livestock.
Oh, that made me sad too. Like, oh, the poor like goats and stuff on
Yeah.
these roofs. And they uprooted vegetable gardens. They tipped over outhouses, which is disgusting. And there were even some deaths, and this is where it starts to get a little sad. So,
Mm.
since there was so much vandalism, people started getting more protective over their property, and a few jokesters were actually shot and killed when being mistaken for intruders. One woman was literally scared to death in Indiana in 1907 when she was greeted by a group of boys who were knocking at her door with a grinning pumpkin lantern. Her heart
Oh.
stopped. Stealing and vandalism became even more of a problem during the Great Depression in the 1930s for obvious reasons, and that was when they almost outlawed it entirely. But we make a comeback in World War II when the youngsters of the country came together and said, don't take away Halloween. We're going to be better this year. We're going to stop the vandalism, and we can just make this a happy celebration in honor of the soldiers abroad.
Okay, not really getting the connection, but okay.
I guess they're just like, we don't have the energy to fuck around, and there's so much shit going on.
Yeah.
There were like children's communities in Pennsylvania that literally came together and like wrote out, we're not going to do this anymore. So like, let's just keep Halloween. and
Okay.
make it.
Okay.
I know I'm kind of confused on how they organized, but they did. And Halloween got to stay and it became more of a happy, joyful occasion. So this is where modern trick-or-treating comes into play, because during these years, the tradition of trick-or-treating was revived to say, I'm going to give you a treat and then just don't vandalize me and don't play a trick on me, which I think is kind of hilarious.
Now people just say trick or treat. Obviously, no one is going to trick you. But back then it was like, no, like a real threat behind those words.
Yeah, an actual threat behind the trick-or-treat. So today, obviously, we don't do that as much, but I did read apparently in New England, teenagers have a trickster day now on the day before Halloween on October 30th. It's called Mischief Day. And that's when
Hmm.
they'll like TP somebody's house, egg people's houses and stuff.
Okay,
So
it
it's
sounds like senior prank day.
yeah. So anyway, this is how the American tradition of Halloween was born and grew. And now it's an estimated $12 billion holiday, and it's the second largest commercial holiday after Christmas.
Wow, I didn't realize it was right after Christmas.
I know. I thought it would have been Thanksgiving, but no, it's
Yeah.
Halloween.
Given you're such a fan of Halloween, was there anything that you learned that you're like, oh, this is gonna like change how I celebrate this year?
I was really surprised by the more modern origins of trick or treating and how it was such an incitement of crime. I had no idea. So the more modern iterations, I was really surprised by. But I think my feeling that Halloween is less about getting drunk and going to a party and more about trying to commune with the spirits is completely validated. So I'm just going to keep doing that this Halloween.
Yeah, yeah. I want to learn more about the women who were trying to picture their future husbands or like conduct some magic. They were using like yarn and mirrors. Like, I want to know what that's about.
Yeah. It does make me kind of want to dress up as like a devil or an angel this year for Halloween.
Hmm.
I feel like that's actually like a really cool costume now. I'm not going to lie.
So it's really interesting to learn about the origins of Halloween coming from desire to commune with the dead. And that's something that I looked at in other cultures. So, what people believe happens after death, obviously, that depends on both a religious and cultural context. And three places that I picked were the Mexican celebration of Dia de los Muertos, the Japanese Oban celebration, and then the third is actually less connected to a specific holiday, but just the practice of Ghanaian funerals. Because I actually have
Ooh.
been to Ghana, so I have some experience with that myself, and I wanted to do some research on why it is the way it is. Because this is such a broad topic, when I'm talking about Dia de los Muertos, for example, I'm talking specifically about the Mexican celebration, even though that holiday is also celebrated in Ecuador, Guatemala, Haiti, the Philippines. My focus is going to be on Mexico and like the particular intersection of culture, history, religious impact on that region. So, all that being said, I feel like people are somewhat familiar with Dia de los Muertos in the US because of our proximity to Mexico and then also the success of Coco, the Disney movie. Have you seen Coco?
I have, and I was in Epcot last year, and Mexico and Epcot is totally Coco themed, and like they have all the sugar skulls and everything's like Dia de los Muertos. It's super cute. I love the vibes.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like the vibes are probably actually more suited to what you're excited about when you think
That's
about Halloween than maybe even Halloween is. I think there's like a common misconception that Dia de los Muertos is just the Mexican version of Halloween, and it's really not. So let's get into it. The Day of the Dead is a Mexican holiday where families welcome back the souls of their deceased relatives for a brief reunion. It is a blend of Mesoamerican ritual, European religion, and Spanish culture. So, a lot of the history you just provided us about All Souls Day is relevant here. While October 31st is Halloween, November 1st to 2nd is the Day of the Dead. The tradition is that the border between the spirit world and the real world dissolves at midnight. And so on November 1st, the spirits of children can rejoin their families for 24 hours.
Oh,
And the spirits of adults can do the same on November 2nd.
oh wait, that's so precious. So sweet.
Yeah. So during this period when the border between worlds is gone, the souls of the dead reawaken. They return to the living world to feast, drink, dance, and play music with their loved ones. Shout out Coco with the music. And living family members treat the deceased as honored guests in their celebrations and leave the deceased's favorite foods and other offerings at grave sites or on ofrendas, which are altars that people build inside their homes. And these ofrendas are beautiful. They're decorated with candles, marigolds, lots of fruit and food. And as you said, today, how it's celebrated, like the most common symbols are the skeletons and the skulls. So people commonly wear skull masks, eat sugar candy. There are parades. I think it's the parades plus the skeletons that get it somewhat mixed up with Halloween in the American context. And it does share some history, like that Spanish European history. And Catholicism is obviously a really important religion in Mexico as well. Here's where the roots differ, right? So the roots on the pre-Columbian Mesoamerica side go back 3,000 years. The Aztecs and the Nahua people, which is the people from that region, had a cyclical view of the universe. So they saw death as an integral part of life, upon dying, a person was believed to travel to the land of the dead only after getting through 9 challenging levels, which would take several years.
Wait, this was a Mesoamerican
Mhm.
tradition? The world is so fascinating. Like, there's so many echoes of that same like, this is reminding me of the Divine Comedy, the 9 levels of hell.
Yeah, very true.
Crazy. But that's, like, obviously completely independently derived.
Yeah.
Wild. How can you not think that there's some, like, paranormal spooky shit going on when you hear this kind of stuff? It's the only explanation, I'm convinced. Either that or, like, aliens.
Or like God, I guess, coming from a atheist girl here.
I include God and paranormal spooky shit. Like,
Oh, I think many would disagree with that, but okay. So, in Nahua rituals honoring the dead, these were traditionally held in August. Family members provided food, water, and tools to aid the deceased in this difficult and challenging journey towards their final resting place. And the living members providing for the dead is what inspired a lot of the contemporary Day of the Dead celebrations and practices. So, that being said, I mean, there is something just so poetic and beautiful about the border between worlds dissolving. A through line that I found through a lot of the research, including some of these other places I'm about to cover, is just this idea that we're like very connected to our ancestors and we're very connected to the people who've passed on. And as a non religious person living in the United States, I have not had a ton of experience with death or death rituals in my life or in my own cultural context. When I was a freshman in college, I lived with a host family for a month in Kumasi, Ghana. And because of the nature of the program, the leader of the trip was a professor of African studies at the University of Michigan, where I was going to school. And he had a lot of connections to that community. So he did a very good job of really making sure we were integrated into the community. So my host mom was like 20 something, like just a couple years older than me. And I remember the first weekend I was there, we went to a Ghanaian funeral. I was kind of surprised because clearly I don't know the person who just died, but we had an outfit made for me that was black, made out of traditional Asante cloth. And I went with her and I was shocked as a person who had never really even experienced funerals in the United States. It was the first time I ever saw a dead body because it was an open casket.
Wow.
And I was shocked by just the scale of the event because it truly was like a celebration. People were dancing, they were singing, there was crying, but as my host mom told me, like in a very performative way. Like the wailing was meant to be a part of the celebration. And the funeral went on for like 8 hours.
Oh my
And
gosh.
every single person in the neighborhood went. Plenty of people were there who did not know the deceased. And it honestly felt to me more like a block party than a funeral.
Wow.
And so that was the first funeral I went to. And then over the course of that 1 month that I was there, I probably went to 10 funerals altogether. Some just with my host mom, as I mentioned, but also with other students from the University of Michigan who were doing this program with me and who were staying with other host families, some of which we even learned coordinated dances to do at the funerals.
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah.
I was about to say, like, if the whole community is coming out and doing this, like, doesn't somebody die probably every day?
It's very common. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, obviously, as you might imagine, this has always had such a strong place in my memory. It was an incredible cultural experience that I feel privileged to have gotten to not only witness, but also participate in. But beyond experiencing it myself and the little like that my host mom would tell me, I didn't actually know that much about why any of this happened or why it was so different than what we experience here in the United States. And I was super excited to do a little bit of research on this. So first, it's definitely true that funerals are not only an occasion to mourn, but a chance to celebrate the life of the person who's departed. Funerals are advertised on huge billboards so that nobody in the community misses out.
Wow.
Funeral success is measured by extravagance and attendance. These 2 to 8 hour performances require seating arrangements, clothing, musicians, transportation, activities, banquets, and there's even this relatively new tradition of elaborate coffins. So this is not something I witnessed myself, but was one of the first things I found when I was doing research online, which is that it is now very popular to commission a coffin for the deceased that illustrates either the person's profession, their interests, or their status. So a coffin could be a uterus shape for a gynecologist or a shoe shape for a cobbler. I'm going to include photos, definitely, in the video. I saw photos of coffins that were airplanes or Coca-Cola bottles or even vices like a giant cigarette packet.
Incredible. Oh my god.
So yeah, clearly really different.
I feel like your coffin shape would be your dog. It would be like a Rooney-shaped coffin. You're like, "I finally get to crawl inside his skin."
That's so real. Yeah, that's extremely 100% accurate. Coffin makers are highly sought after and regarded as important artists. They also cost a lot of money to build these coffins. And Ghanaians spend as much money on funerals as on weddings, sometimes even more.
Oh.
Quote, an average funeral should cost between $15,000 to $20,000. That was a quote from this funeral planner who was in charge of 30 funerals that one day alone. The typical funeral is often known to cost nearly as much as a Ghanaian's yearly income.
Whoa, so do you have to, like, save in your life for your funeral, or
You
is it your
save, you
family?
borrow. Yeah. There's some criticism of this in that, like, why are people spending so much on the dead versus investing those huge sums of money in the living or even on people who are sick and might not yet die if they get the proper medical attention? The question of why is very fascinating. And here's really interesting crossover with your Halloween discussion. It's because Ghanaians believe in reincarnation and they believe in ghosts. The Khans, which are the major ethnic group in Ghana, believe that upon death, the spirit of the deceased departs the body and embarks on a journey to the afterlife. This journey lasts several days, and they encounter various challenges like rugged terrain, mountains, lakes, rivers, and they need money to pay for the cost of transportation and to pay for snacks and drinks, of course, along the journey. And so the deceased are buried with money so that the ghost, the spirit, can use that money to pay for transportation.
I love that I think there's, like, concession stands along the way,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
like, get yourself a little snack.
Right, right. And like the deceased in a Khan tradition is also buried with a handkerchief, which they were supposed to use on the journey to wipe sweat from their faces. Every single thing that you might want on a road trip is like thought of. Another common practice is that at the funeral, you visit the body. All of the guests line up and do a pass through. And when you're near the body, you're supposed to whisper a message to the deceased. And some examples of what people whisper I found to be really interesting because I think it's indicative of what they believe about the afterlife. So here are some quotes. As you leave, take my illness with you. Otherwise, when you get there, send me medicine so that I will heal. And then all these years, I have not been able to bear a child. When you arrive there, send me a child.
Oh, okay, so they believe they, like, get powerful in the afterlife and can really, like, come back and affect things here on Earth.
Absolutely. Yeah. So
Wow.
they believe that the dead can influence their fortunes here in the real world. And so they believe in good spirits, bad spirits, and wandering spirits. Because a ghost can bless you, but also it can curse you and punish the living, it's so important for them to spend money on making sure that the dead have a good send off. Obviously, there's many cultural reasons why Ghanaians spend a lot on funerals, but like this belief that what you do for the dead really matters and can come back and affect your life is like a big part of why people view it as worth the investment. On the one hand, you can act out of fear because you fear a bad ghost, you fear what they'll do to you. On the other hand, ghosts can be very benevolent in Ghanaian culture, but also like as we move into Japanese culture, here we're like really focusing on ghosts that are specifically your ancestors. And because they're related to you, they're generally seen as more beneficent ghosts. And I feel like this connection to the souls of the dead is just so different than what I've experienced here in America. And I know this is true of Protestantism. They believe that as soon as a person dies, they're gone. And like, yes, they're in heaven or hell, but they're not present and they cannot affect your daily life anymore. Whereas across these three other cultures that I studied, it really is not like that. It's very much interconnected with our lives now. And so this brings us to Oban. So Oban is an annual Buddhist event that commemorates one's ancestors whose spirits are believed to temporarily return to this world in order to visit their relatives. Very similar to many of the things we've already been discussing. It's based on the lunar calendar, but it's observed mainly from August 13th to August 16th.
Not October.
Yeah, different timing. So on the first day of Oban, people take lanterns to the graves of their families. They call the spirits of their ancestors back home in a ritual. And in some regions, they also light huge fires at the entrances of their houses to guide the spirits to enter. The festival itself, there are lots of dances, food celebrations, and people visit graves, brush the tombstones, and make food offerings at altars within the homes. And then at the end of Oban, floating lanterns are put into rivers, lakes, and seas in order to guide the spirits back to their world.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
So beautiful, yeah.
That gave me chills. It's very beautiful.
It reminds me of that scene from Tangled. That's what I was picturing.
Stop. I was too. I didn't want to say anything though, because I'm like, that's not what this is.
Yeah, I mean, Oban is such a large holiday in Japan. I didn't realize this, but it's actually considered one of Japan's 3 major holiday seasons. It is one of the busiest travel times of the year. So a lot of Japanese people will leave the cities that they live in and go back to their hometowns. It's essentially like a full week that they take off work. And in some ways, it kind of reminds me of how Chinese New Year is celebrated, where like everybody goes home, the cities are emptied, and it's all about being with your family. And in this case, also being with your ancestors.
Sounds like these other traditions are more focused around the human spirit specifically and the souls, whereas the more like European American tradition is any paranormal being. And it's not necessarily like a human soul of somebody that you know that's untransformed. It's like, oh, there could be like little trickster phantoms and different kinds of beings. The veil between the spiritual world and the earthly world, whereas here it sounds like it's the veil between the living and the dead humans.
Yeah, so you don't have to deal with like demons or like true evil creatures in these contexts. Yeah.
Well, that is super interesting. I love hearing what other cultures think happens in the afterlife because often it's pretty unified. People don't really have these very different concepts of what spirits are, where your souls go. Like, not many cultures believe that just nothing happens after either. And so I think it's kind of beautiful that we all, even uninfluenced by each other's cultures, just kind of have the same reoccurring themes and ideas of what happened to us and that we all celebrate on some level the spiritual world.
I mean, I feel like 3 really disparate regions, right? And I was shocked to find all of these commonalities between them.
Yeah.
And to your point, this concept that once a person passes into the spirit realm, they're like on a journey. I feel like that's so common in so many different religions and cultures. And as I was doing research, I think the thing that it made me feel was like, wow, from a psychological perspective, it feels much more healthy to have like this kind of relationship with your dead where you believe that you're still connected to them in some way versus the Western, I guess I'm specifically thinking like US, Western European culture, religion around, I think on both sides, the living and the dead lose that bond. Like they're no longer connected to one another. Yes, there's heaven and hell, but it feels almost like punitive and less like a journey. It's kind of like your journey's over. You already like made the decisions in your life as to whether you're going to end up in heaven and hell. Death is more like the reward of your life and you're just completely cut off from the living world.
Yeah, definitely culturally, that's more true for sure. These cultures that have more of that sense of connection with it, I think it makes the world more wondrous and magical in some way. I think it's really beautiful. And even if you're somebody who's totally atheist or very science driven and it's like, I can't believe in that unless I see evidence or whatever it is, it's just fun. It is fun. It makes the world kind of sparkly and fantastic in a way. And I think it's really beautiful when there are cultures that have like entire holidays centered around this imaginative thing that can just like make us feel good.
Totally.
Happy Halloween.
Yeah. Doing all this research, it does make it such a more meaningful holiday for me. Now I just feel like Halloween is so commercialized. You know, of course I'm going to buy the candy and I'm going to welcome trick-or-treaters, but it's cool to know that it has such a deeper history and meaning.
I love it. I feel so much more informed about Halloween now as I celebrate. So hopefully you all do too.
Thanks.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
If you enjoy the pod, we would love for you to give us a follow and rate us on Apple Podcasts, which helps us get the word out and reach new listeners. Our sources are available on Patreon, where if you choose to become a patron, you'll also get access to bonus content, our monthly book club, and our eternal gratitude.
If you'd like to get in touch or suggest a topic for a future episode, email us at everythingiknowaboutpod@gmail.com or DM us across all socials at EikaPod, that's EIKA pod. Thanks for listening and see you next week.